Well, hello, everybody. This video is covering the Gospel of John, the 19th chapter, verses 25 to 30. And I'm preparing this to be put up on YouTube and to be shared on Facebook for January 19th of 2022. If you're coming along and watching this at some time in the future, we thank you for coming to see us. Please take a look at the channel. We have a lot of things on here. We are closing on 950 videos on our channel, or on my channel, I should say. And there's playlists with the various different books of the Bible that I've done devotions for so far, and it's kind of a devotion slash study is the format that I utilize. I tend to be, I always say I'm more of a teacher than a preacher many times, though I do also try to find at least part of the time, or the majority of the time, some life application, something that we can take away from these verses that we can apply in our own lives. So we left Jesus on the cross. The soldiers were dividing up his garments, the cloak or the tunic that he had that was woven of one piece, starting at the top and woven down. They didn't want to rend that or tear it, so they are casting lots. And so thus that was fulfilling the prophecy of Psalm 22, verse 18. But I don't think I mentioned it in yesterday's devotion. The one thing about that is we oftentimes envision Christ in these white garments, this beautiful, smooth and silk, or a sleek, I should say, not silk, sleek looking garment, maybe a linen, kind of a light linen, not a heavy linen. But the reality is that his clothes were probably rough. They wouldn't have been white. Very few people had white clothing. It was not easy to accomplish white. Plus, it's not particularly pragmatic for something that you're going to wear day in and day out. I mean, you didn't have many changes of clothes, not like we do now, where you walk into your closet and you've got many people have tons of clothing. Myself, I have way too many t-shirts, some of which I'm, don't use anymore, but I don't want to get rid of them for whatever reason, because they're so oftentimes I buy them as souvenirs, so I don't want to get rid of a souvenir, even though it's a shirt I don't wear much anymore. But it's not like that. They have maybe one pair of clothes, very likely one pair of clothes, and maybe some undergarments that they exchange, but the outer garment would be the same. And so having to be white wouldn't have been practical. It was likely a dark brown or a brownish colored, and it was most likely a heavy woven, not a finely done piece, let's put it that way. Would have been coarse. In fact, there is various different people that believe they have, there are different groups that claim they have the outer garment of Christ, and if you look that up, there are different people that claim that. I kind of doubt it, but hey, it's like the shroud of Turin thing. I kind of doubt it, but who knows? We'll wait and see. We'll find out in the end, won't we? Yes. So let's take a look at verses 25 to 30 in the 19th chapter of John today. And this has some of my favorite things to wrestle with, so we'll talk about that. And that is what the soldiers did. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, and the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home. After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was standing there, so they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Okay, oftentimes that wine on the hyssop is sour vinegar or it's sour wine. It's not the best by any stretch. It's wine that's past its peak, so to say. And it's there for whatever reason, perhaps for the soldiers. You wouldn't think they normally would be giving and providing things to the people on the cross. But I don't want to belabor that, because that's not the point. Don't think there's any point to that, other than that is there to fulfill the scripture. Okay. Anyway, Jesus here has died on the cross. This is the end of the display on Golgotha. But Here at the beginning of this, meanwhile, standing near the cross were Jesus' mother, her sister, and Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. We have three Marys there, okay? And then we also have the disciple that Jesus loved and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her. Now, the big debate about is who is the disciple Jesus loved. Many people believe it to be John. And there is a reason for that. They're saying his modesty, he doesn't ever name himself. He always just addresses himself as the disciple who Jesus loved. I don't find that particularly modest, personally. I find that being quite egotistical, let's say. So I don't think that John would have wrote himself in as being the disciple that Jesus loved. I don't find that being a very good model to set you on, but I'm better than the rest of you because Jesus loved me. There is somebody in the scripture that Jesus has already said that he loved, and that's Lazarus back in chapter 11. And so there are those that present that it's Lazarus that is the disciple that Jesus loved. I have a slightly different philosophy or theory on this. I think it's James, the brother of Christ. And people say, what do you mean? Why would it be James? Well, because in Jewish tradition, this scene to me is what tells me that this is James. James is his very close brother. James takes over the ministry. It's really not Peter that takes over. In Acts, we know that it's James that's making the final decisions. We also know that James and Paul have a contentious relationship because of Acts and from Galatians and some other things. So we know that James and Paul have a bit of a loggerheads. They don't necessarily see eye to eye on how this whole thing is supposed to go. And so that's why I think that they perhaps didn't name James here, because this is written, John is probably written somewhere around 90 AD. Some think even later. Some push it into the 2nd century, to be honest. I don't know if you're all aware of that or not. This is the last of the Gospels to be written, without a doubt. It is the most different Gospel to be written. But I think it's James because here, what happens at the foot of the cross is Jesus is giving over to his mother. Somebody has taken over the responsibility to the mother. And that is a Jewish son. A Jewish son, it was the eldest son was in charge to take care of his mom. If father died, because typically there was a disparity in the ages there, and it's father just, unless the mother died in childbirth, it's very often that the father, just like today, the father would die ahead of the mother, and even more so perhaps then when there was more of a disparity in the age of the father would be considerably older than the wife. So Joseph is gone. So I think that what's happening here would have been a very big slight, and James would have been very, very, very much insulted had his older brother, Jesus, and we know that Jesus had other brothers, there's Jude and James for certain, perhaps Thomas, Didymus, but others, he has brothers and sisters. So it would have been an incredible slight, an insult, a grievous insult for Jesus to give to John the custody, basically, for want of a better word, of Mary Magdalene, or Mary, the mother of Jesus, for him to turn over her to skip over his other brothers, that would have been a real faux pas in Hebrew culture, the Israeli culture. It's James, in my opinion. James is the next oldest brother. James takes over as the leader of the Christian movement when Jesus is gone. I think he also takes over taking care of Mary, and she goes home with James, the second oldest son. Now we'll talk at the end of John about what they're the only hiccup in that theory is at the end in chapter 21. We'll talk about that when we get to chapter 21. But I think that Jesus is taking care of his mother by turning her over to her brother James. And James, of course, does go on and does take care of the movement as well until he is martyred in 63 AD by being thrown from the temple and beaten with a fuller's club. We know when James died. But here, the point we take away from this as life application is Jesus knows that it's finished. What he needed to do is he came into this world to live and die. He's the eldest son. He has a responsibility to God for what God sent him to do, but he also has a responsibility for all of us, and his mother included. And he has arranged for the care of her. He's not deserted her. He's not left her abandoned. He's not deserted her in any sense of fashion of the way. He has a plan. He has someone prepared to care for her. And the same is for us. We have to have faith and we have to believe that no matter what we face, God will take care of us. That God has a plan. He knows our days. That He knows them. He's counted them out. He's counted our hair, the hairs on our head. Doesn't take many to count mine. So He doesn't work too hard. There's more on my chin than there is on my head. But nonetheless, He knows us. He knows our future. He cares for us, and He will care for us. He will guard us. He will provide for us, just as He's providing for His mother here in this story. No matter who you believe the beloved disciple is, whether you believe it's John or you believe it's Lazarus, or if you agree with me, you should agree with me that it's James. I'm kidding there. But I believe it's James that's taking over the care of his mother for his older brother. He's next in line, and he is taking on that responsibility. Woman, here is your son. He is her son. He's the second oldest son. So that's my theory on all of that. But there is a definite message there about care and love and concern. God's not going to desert you or I or anyone else. So with that, we are going to pick up with verse 31 tomorrow, and we'll go on from there. So have a very blessed day, and please, please, please be a blessing to someone today. And while you're at it, like and subscribe. And if you don't like these devotions, please share them, spread the word. We'd love to grow the channel a little bit more. We've grown a little bit lately. It's gone a long time without me pushing it, trying to push it a little bit more here at this point in time. All right. Thank you very much. God bless.